lesson, I am going to give you 50 alternatives for the word said, and these alternatives will be conveniently grouped into 10 little categories. Right, let's get started with the story and the vocab lesson. Here is the first part of the story. As I've previously stated, I used to work as a waitress. I've remarked on this in a couple of older videos. I am pleased to report that nobody was harmed during my time as a waitress, but I will add that some customers didn't receive what they ordered. Okay, so in that section of the story, we have 4 alternatives for said, and these are all grouped under the heading of no emotion or normal. You'll see going forward that a lot of the other alternatives have emotion or feelings attached to them, or they're used for a specific purpose. So we have 1, to state, 2, to remark, 3, to report, and 4, to add, Now onto the next group of alternatives. We have alternatives for when you're asking a question or replying. So this is how I got my first job. It's a conversation between me and my mum. How can I get a job when I live in a tiny village with no shops? I asked. Why don't you try the local pub? Answered my mum. That's a very good idea, I acknowledged. So later that day, I walked into the pub. Do you have any vacancies for a weekend waitress? I inquired. We might be able to make some space for you, replied the landlady, Linda. Please make space for me, I begged. Can I see your CV? She requested. I can show you my exam grades, but I don't have any work experience, I explained. Why would I care about your exam grades? This is a pub. You can start on Saturday, she retorted. Okay, we finished the second part of the story. Let's take a look at the alternatives for said when you're asking questions. We have to ask, pretty normal. We also have to inquire, which means you want to receive information about something. To beg means you really want something. You're trying to persuade this person to do something. And we also have to request, which is maybe a little more polite. Moving on to answers, we have to answer, pretty simple. But an interesting one is to acknowledge. This means you accept something's true, or you accept that something's good. You accept someone's idea. We also have to reply, to explain. They're fairly simple as well. But a really good one is to retort, which is to reply sharply, almost with a bit of attitude. Okay, let's move on to the next part of the story, and this includes alternatives for said that you can use to show happiness. When I got home to see my parents, Richard and Kim, I was so happy. I got the job, I rejoiced. I knew that landlady was completely nuts, joked my dad. You can't say that, Richard, laughed my mum. Nuts or not, I'm officially employed, I giggled. You can start paying rent now, smirked my dad. Jokes aside, we are really proud of you, beamed my mum. So let's look at those alternatives more closely. We have to rejoice, which means you say something sort of whilst celebrating, you're so happy. We have to joke when you're making a joke. We have to laugh when someone is laughing whilst saying something. The same goes for giggle. A giggle is a cheekier laugh. If you smirk, it means you're smiling in a sort of silly or smug way. So my dad was pleased with his joke. And we also say to beam, which means to be really smiling.